The human's hand rested on the console, 2 fingers from the black chess piece, and the weapons bay's containment fields hummed their low magnetic hymn around 300 tons of alien ordnance that, in 11 seconds, would become irrelevant. Junior Liaison Scivalith's bioluminescence had already begun to stutter. She did not yet understand why. If this is your first time here, join us, because what this young officer just walked into is going to change how she sees every species in the galaxy, including her own. Now, back to the beginning. The chess piece had been the first thing she noticed, 6 hours before the containment field sang. It sat upright on the human's console like a small dark monument, and Scivalith, still adjusting the fit of her new liaison sash, had nearly mistaken it for a sensor component. "What is that?" she asked. The human glanced down. A reminder. He didn't elaborate. Scivalith's spiral nebula pattern, the one curling across her left shoulder like a signature she'd been born wearing, pulsed a dim question blue. She let it go. She was 23 cycles old, the youngest liaison the Belithi Current Assembly had ever posted to a neutral station, and she had been told, firmly and repeatedly, that this inspection would be routine. 1 hour. Weapons parity review. Sign the forms, file the data, go home. Senior Observer Krielf, the variant assigned as her counterpart, met her outside the bay with 4 silver eyes blinking in staggered sequence. His scales caught the overhead lighting and threw it back dull. "Humans," he said, scrolling through a classification tablet. "Mid-tier, standard kinetic and directed energy platforms. Nothing you haven't seen from a dozen other oxygen breathers." He paused. "This shouldn't take more than an hour." Scivalith nodded. She believed him. The demonstration began at 0940 station time. Belithi engineers had spent 3 years refining the current assembly's newest directed plasma array, and the test chamber filled with light so white it burned after images into Scivalith's secondary membranes. The magnetic containment field screamed at frequencies she felt in her cartilage. Krielf's 4 eyes narrowed to approving slits. Even the station technicians stepped back from their own monitors. The human didn't blink. He sat in the observer's chair with one ankle crossed over his knee, arms loose, watching the way someone watches weather through a window. No notes, no recording device, no stylus, no datapad, no reaction at all. Scivalith found herself watching him instead of the demonstration, her nebula patterns cycling through confused amber rotations she couldn't suppress. 3 years of engineering. He looked like he was waiting for a meal to arrive. When the array finished its cycle, he yawned, covered his mouth with the back of his hand, then looked at the Belithi delegation. "Is there a second part?" he said, "or was that it?" Nobody answered him. "If you've been watching these stories for a while, come back tomorrow, because this one's not done getting worse. And if you're new, you picked a good night." Scivalith turned back to the main display to log the test results, and the display flickered. Not a malfunction, a shadow. Something passed between the screen and the light source. On a sealed bridge, with nothing between them, something that cast shadow but had no body. Her spiral nebula went dark for a full second, every bioluminescent cell on her left shoulder extinguishing at once, and the cold that replaced the light ran so deep she felt it in the fluid around her spine. Light was identity for a Belithi. A shadow without a source was not a glitch. It was an impossibility, wearing the shape of something she had no classification for. She looked at the human. He was watching her, not the display. Her, as if he'd been waiting for her to notice. The human stood, not fast, not slow, the way someone stands when they've already decided what happens next, and none of it worries them. He crossed to the main display, keyed in a sequence Scivalith didn't recognize, and pulled up a star chart that showed the current assembly's 3rd Fleet in formation. Exact coordinates, exact headings, exact energy signatures down to individual reactor outputs. Scivalith's chromatophores went cold. "You detected us," she said. It wasn't a question, but her voice frayed at the edges like one. 72 hours before your fleet powered up its scanners. He said it the way someone mentions the weather. "You went active the moment you entered the sector. Big pulse, Omnidirectional, very bright. He tapped the display. We never went active at all. Passive sensors only. Your scanners were screaming into the dark, and every ping told us exactly where you were, how fast you were moving, what you were carrying. He looked at her. The silent ship detects an active scanner from far, far beyond the range that scanner can detect anything back. You were announcing yourselves. We were listening. Civilith's spiral nebula was cycling through colors she couldn't control, broadcasting distress signatures to every Palithi within visual range. Kriav stood motionless beside her, all four eyes open and unblinking, his silver scales flat and lustreless. Neither of them spoke. The human picked up a datapad from his console, scrolled through it with his thumb, set it down again. We reviewed your weapon systems, he said, a smile. Small, almost gentle. The kind a parent gives a child who has proudly shown them a drawing. Adorable. We've added them to our museum. And now, back in the weapons bay, under the hum of containment fields that suddenly sounded less like security and more like a cage, Civilith's bioluminescent pattern did something it had never done in her 23 cycles of life. It scrambled. Every cell, every signature, every luminous thread that marked her as herself went dark, then erupted in random noise. Her identity markers vanished, her pouch sealed, her body curled inward, cartilage folding, limbs drawing tight, the ancient Palithi defensive posture that predated language, predated thought, predated everything except the deepest animal knowledge that she was in the presence of something her species had no framework to survive. She floated there, helpless, a dark knot of extinguished light in a room full of weapons that didn't matter. The human watched her curl. His expression shifted, not triumph, something quieter. He crossed the bay in 4 steps, lowered himself to her eye level, and spoke in a voice so stripped of threat it almost hurt. Hey, you're okay. Breathe. She couldn't answer, but her nebula pattern, the spiral on her left shoulder, flickered once, faint, searching. He nodded, as if that flicker was enough. You showed me your best work today, he said. That plasma array is 3 years of brilliant engineering. The fact that we're ahead doesn't make it small. He paused. It makes us neighbors at different points on the same road. Civilith's pattern steadied. 1 thread of light, then 2, then a slow returning constellation that wasn't quite the signature she'd walked in with. Changed, but present. On the console behind him, the Black King stood where it had always stood. She understood it now. Not a reminder, a declaration. The king doesn't run. But what she'd missed before, what her 23 cycles hadn't been enough to see at first glance, was simpler than threat. The king stands still because the game is already won, and the winner is choosing not to move. So what do you think the human was really reminding himself of? Patience or mercy? We'll have another story tomorrow. Bring your answer.